The Old Testament reading is Habakkuk, chapter 1, beginning with the first verse. The oracle of God which Habakkuk the prophet saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and thou wilt not hear? Or cry to thee violence, and thou wilt not save? Why dost thou make me see wrongs and look upon trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law is slacked, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. I will take my stand to watch and station myself on the tower and look forth to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain upon tablets so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Behold, he whose soul is not upright in him shall fail, but the righteous shall live by his faith. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
In the late spring of 1986, Lisa and I were newlyweds at the time, been married about a month. Our bishop, L. Bevel Jones, reached out to me and said that he had a new church assignment for me. I was a pastor of a little church out in the country. He said, you're going to be moving to Charlotte. You were going to send you to Plaza United Methodist Church, right out on the plaza, right near where it crosses Milton Road. I was excited about new work. I was especially excited about taking my wife to a new church. So this is going to be such a happy thing. I thought that until I came down and met with leaders of the church a few weeks before I began work. It was a gloomy meeting indeed. They used terms like teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Oh, good. We love that. And then they told me, that, this started well, they said, we have organized everybody in the parish into little house groups, and you'll go from neighborhood to neighborhood, and you'll meet with small groups of our church people. And I thought, that is fabulous. And they said, and we have a topic for each day. I said, what is it? And they said, you will get to listen to people tell what's wrong with our church. And I thought, what's wrong with the church? We changed that agenda, by the way. I made everybody tell me, what do you love about this church? What's wrong with the church? It's always a long list, isn't it? The individual sins that afflict us also afflict the church. Churches get curved down on themselves. Churches get lazy. Churches get infected by the political ideology. Church sometimes is a little bit like Halloween. Tomorrow night, people will dress up in costumes, and that's a little scary. Sometimes church people, they come looking like good church people, and it can be a little scary at times. Some of the fault finding of the church comes in different categories. I did a podcast recently with my friend, Lillian Daniel, who is a UCC pastor up in Michigan. Two of her books are interesting in this connection. She wrote one book called, I'm Tired of Apologizing for a Church I Don't Belong to. So sometimes you hear people, they say, I don't like church because, and they fill in the blank. And whatever it is they say, I say, that's not true of my church or any other church that I know anything about, but they don't like that. She wrote another book called Spiritual But Not Religious. Do you know this tribe of people? They're spiritual, but they are not religious. They want to be spiritual church, just regarded as like a barrier to them. It's going to trip them up. They don't want to be part of church. They can do God just fine without the church. They think they can do God better without the church. The risk in this, like you know this, is your religious life then becomes very narcissistic, and you kind of become a little echo chamber unto yourself. Spiritual but not religious people, they love things like sunsets. They're so beautiful. God's handiwork in the sunset. That is a nice thing, isn't it? There's a couple in our church that have invited me and Lisa to their home for dinner tonight, and they chose the time of our arrival so that we could catch the sunset over the water. Well, it's a cloudy, rainy day now, isn't it? If you're spiritual but not religious, you get depressed on a cloudy day. You want the sunset, the beautiful handy. At church, we learn how to deal with the cloudy day. At church, we get called out of something into something that is better than just me and my preferred thoughts about God. Sometimes the things that people don't like about the good are actually the virtues of the church. T.S. Eliot wrote these words: "Why should people love the church? Why should they love her laws? She tells them of life and of death and of all that they would forget. She is tender where they would be hard. She is hard where they like to be soft. She tells them of evil and sin and other unpleasant facts," right? Like, you come here and we tell you about unpleasant facts. You don't thank me all that much, but it's a thing. Are y'all with me today? Or y'all? Sometimes the faults of the church is strength. For instance, sometimes people complain to me. They say church people are hard to get along with. There's friction. Somebody said this to me recently. There's friction in the church. I'm reminded of the psychiatrist Scott Peck, who was doing marital counseling with a woman who was in a very unhappy marriage indeed. And he asked her, "Why do you stay in the marriage?" And she thought about it and she said, "I stay for the friction," which is a peculiar answer. Friction, on the one hand, seems to be a bad thing. It's like, oh, it's uncomfortable, it creates sparks. But then on the other hand, what friction does, if you stay with it, friction polishes. We come to church, we stay with whatever friction there may be, and it polishes us, and we come then to mirror God's presence to the world ever more clearly. I love church. I love this church. I love many churches. I love churches that I know of in other denominations. I love Methodist churches, and I know a bunch of them because I've been doing this a long time. I know pastors all over the place. Nathan does as well. I love Methodist churches, and something we learned during the pandemic is several people during the pandemic said to me, since we couldn't come to church, people said, "I love church more than I thought I did. Like, I like that. Like, I miss church. I love church. I want to be there. I like that." I love church, but now, for us who are Methodists, there's a great grief that is descending upon Methodist churches. There are little churches and some big ones who are losing their minds. Every day I'm getting calls from people, and they say to me things like, "My little home church where I grew up, where I was baptized, where I got married, they are voting next week on whether to leave the denomination. What is that about?" And my view of what it's about, churches are voting and taking sides. It's on the issue of inclusion, or maybe I should say exclusion. It occurs to me when this goes on that instead of healing America, churches have decided that we will mirror the rancor that is America. Instead of healing America, churches are willing to let themselves be ruined by America. Sad times. Tomorrow's October 31st, Halloween. It'll be great fun. The most famous October 31st in church history, you may know this, came in the year 1517. Martin Luther was a monk in the city of Wittenberg in Germany. He nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, prompting the Reformation of the church. And I don't know about you, when I read about this as a kid and then thinking about it through seminary and early in my ministry, I thought, this is such a heroic moment. I wish I could be like Luther. Luther was amazing. October 31st, 1517, just such a great day. There's always an underbelly to these things, isn't there? It turns out that Martin Luther was like one of the great anti-Semitic guys of all time. More importantly, what Luther did on October 31st of 1517 is he created the largest church division in history. I had not thought about this. I hate to admit it. I had not thought about this until on the 500th anniversary of that date, I was invited to go and do a program on Martin Luther for the Roman Catholic Diocese of South Carolina. So I go down, I've got a room of priests and nuns and Roman Catholics, and I thought to give my usual talk like, Luther was great. Luther condemned those Catholics and he created the Protestant. There were Catholics that I was talking to, right, who were very noble and holy, like Luther created a big church division. What Luther's whole point was in that His goal wasn't to divide the church or to create a better church. What Luther was about is he had had severe personal struggles. He was a guy who, when he got up in the morning, he wanted to please God in his actions, in his thoughts, in his words all day long. And it was hard. It was hard to get it done. So he kept thinking of the ways that he fell short of what God was asking of him, and he felt ashamed. He felt ashamed. I don't know if you heard it, Taylor Pride Barefoot preached last Sunday at 8:30 and 11. At 9:45, you had to put up with Uyan Kim. It's a struggle. Taylor preached a brilliant sermon at 8:30 and 11, and you can catch it on YouTube. People sometimes say to me, I missed your sermon Sunday. Like, you're not off the hook. It's always out there. I say this to people. So Taylor preached a sermon, and I love this. It was on that story that Jesus tells about the two guys praying. And one guy is really cocky. He stands up and he says, oh, I thank you, God, that I am not like other people. But then in the background, there's that tax collector, and he's very humble. He's so humble that he is bowed down in his shame and humility before God. I'd never thought about this before. Taylor had such a beautiful point in her sermon. She said, it's not that God says you should be like this man who is bowed down in his shame. So what God's about is liberating you from shame. It's not that you should be bowed down in shame before God. God's grace comes. God's love comes. God says you are enough. God says you are mine. And instead of being bowed down, you stand with your head erect. You have a new dignity in God. That was Luther's magical moment 4 years later. He got called on the carpet by the powers that be in Europe, and they said, you must renounce what you are doing. He was just talking about the grace of God and the salvation that we have in Christ. They said, you must renounce this. And he said, here I stand. Here I stand. His favorite Bible verse is the same as Paul's favorite Bible verse. It's in that obscure book of Habakkuk. It's just fun to say, isn't it, Alina? Habakkuk. You don't get to say that very often. Habakkuk was a prophet in the 7th century. The Assyrian Empire was crumbling, but then the Babylonian Empire was on the rise. It's always something. One empire falls, you get a new one. One political party is out, the next political party is in. It's always something. And Habakkuk hears God's word and shares it with us, and the word is, the righteous shall live by faith. The righteous shall live by faith. He does not say, the righteous shall judge other people. He doesn't say the righteous are right. In fact, for Paul and for Habakkuk, the righteous one is not you. You are not righteous. It is God who is righteous. It is Jesus who is righteous. He comes to save us. He comes to show mercy to us. Ours is to have faith. Ours is to trust. Ours is to believe that his love for us is real. We don't have to be cowering in shame. We don't have to be cocky in our spirituality. Instead, we know that I was made by God. I am loved by God. There's so much dignity and hope and wonder in that. It's Jesus' faith. The question we could ask, did Jesus want to found a church? Jesus, is that what he wanted? A church, an institution? We have a church, we have an institution. We're lucky here to be part of a pretty amazing institution. We got a fabulous building. We do a lot of amazing things. We can talk about thousands of pounds of food that we are collecting. Nathan and I recently were able, in a church like this, to go to Poland and then go over into Ukraine to look at our work with refugees there. It's cool to be part of the institution. The question we could ask, though, did Jesus come to found an institution? Institutions do dumb things. We all know this. I remember my buddy Shane Page. He used to be one of our pastors, white-hot, brilliant preacher. And sometimes Shane and I would be in different parts of the room at some boring denominational meeting. It'd be getting really tedious and just numbingly dull. And we'd be sitting there, and Shane would text me. It would pop into my phone. He would have taken a photo of the room that I was sitting in, where it was numbingly dull. And he would provide a caption. And his caption was, "Another unintended consequence of the resurrection." Like, Jesus is raised, have an irritating meeting. That church that I served, they were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. When I first got there, they were going to paint the nursery. Oh my God, and they're arguing over how to paint the nursery. Like, Jesus is risen, argue over what color the nursery should be. Unintended consequences of the resurrection. Did Jesus intend to found an institution? The answer has to be yes. Otherwise, you're just spiritual but not religious. We need a place. We got budgets. We got all this stuff to deal with. And I've misparsed this at times. I know when my first church out of seminary, Wesley Chapel Church up in Meisenheimer, it's near Pfeiffer up there. When I got to this church, it was great. There were these men in the church. There was a tribe of, 15 or 20 of them. And they were always at the church tinkering around with the building. They were constantly painting. They were constantly repairing the roof. They were fixing the plumbing, replacing stuff in the toilets. They were mowing the yard, trimming the yard, planting out there. They loved the church building. And they were so devoted to the church. They didn't have a budget like we do to pay for this stuff, right? So they came and they just loved on that building all the time. I remember I had this it's a Neanderthal of a thought. I thought, I need to gather these men together and say, dudes, you shouldn't love the church building, you should love God. I asked an older mentor if I should say such a thing. He said, I'll give you a whipping if you say that to these men. You see, they loved the building because it was God's building. It was for God. They wanted the church to look good because it was for God. They wanted the church not to leak and for the yard to look fabulous and beautiful because it was for God. It was a witness to the world. They loved the building. They loved the institution. Chris Green, in a podcast I did early in this Good Questions series, he defined it better than anybody that I've ever heard. He said, church is the availability of Christ to the world. Church is the availability of Christ to the world. Like God thought, I want them to know me, I want them to love me. So he came as an infant, like we've all been infants. I want them to love me. He grew up, he loved, he taught, he healed. He gave his life for us. He was raised from the dead, and then we got a church. Our church is the availability of Christ to the world. Church isn't to judge people. Church isn't to say you better be like us. Church, I want to tell you what a few people said about church. I found all this week, I kept thinking of great people that I wanted to quote to you. That's the way it is in church life, by the way, is we are always very short people who are perched on the shoulders of giants. We are very short people perched on the shoulders of giants. Here are a couple, and I'll be done. One, Oscar Romero, Archbishop of El Salvador. He dared to stand up to a wicked, corrupt government there, and the government sent henchmen out to his parish on Good Friday. He was standing behind the altar of the church, celebrating the sacrament. They came in with guns and they killed him for the things that he had said. He's a saint now in the Catholic Church. What Oscar Romero said, he said, the task that is entrusted to the church is a difficult task. He said, it is our task to reach out to the world which has an open, gaping wound. And we are to say to the world, you have to treat that. That'll kill you if you don't treat that. And we reach out to touch the wound of the world, and being an open wound, the world recoils because wounds don't like to be touched, but yet we do so gently. We try to reach out and heal the world. Teresa of Avila, another saint from 16th century Spain, she said, yours are the hands of Christ. Yours are the feet of Christ. Yours are the eyes of Christ. Yours are the eyes through which the compassion of Christ is to look out now on the hurting world. Yours are the feet with which Christ is to go about doing good now. Yours are the hands with which he is to bless now. If you want to know how cool you are, how cool we are the body of Christ. Man, it felt like we're very good at it, but he's left it to us. We are the body of Christ. I think about, I read this to you a while back. I'm just moved by these words so much. Mother Maria of Paris. She's also a saint now in the Catholic Church. She was a Latvian woman. And during World War II, she found her way to France, and she hid and sheltered Jewish children as part of the French resistance. The Nazis discovered what she was doing, and they killed her a couple months before World War II ended. Here's what Mother Maria said about church. It would be a great lie to tell those who are searching, go to church, because there you will find peace. She said the opposite is true. The church tells those who are at peace, the church tells those who are asleep, go to church, because there you will feel real anguish for your sin and the world's sin. Go to church, because there you will feel an insatiable hunger for Christ's church. Go to church, because there, instead of being lukewarm, you'll be set on fire. Instead of being pacified, you'll become alarmed. Instead of learning the wisdom of this world, you will become fools for Christ. And then there's this. I've been obsessed in recent years, as part of my reading, with presidential speeches. And part is how they come to be, because they always have a speechwriter, and the speechwriter starts, and the president interacts with them. You know, we have the story of Peggy Noonan. I enjoy reading Peggy Noonan in the Saturday Wall Street Journal. She was Ronald Reagan's speechwriter, and probably the most challenging speech they ever had was after the Challenger disaster. National disaster. That teacher, Krista McAuliffe, on board. America was devastated. What does the president say? And he gave a marvelous speech that was highlighted by something that Peggy Noonan suggested to him. He quoted a poem called High Flight that includes the line, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and touched the face of God. It's beautiful. The other day I was reading about a speech that Barack Obama gave in Selma. They have an annual celebration in Selma of the crossing of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, one of the pivotal moments of the civil rights movement. He was meeting with his speechwriter, Cody Keenan, about what to say, and they went back and forth and finally perfected the speech. And what Obama said, it occurs to me, might be what God is saying to the church. It goes like this. Selma is about each of us asking ourselves what we can do to make America better. That's the American story. Not just scratching for what was or settling for what is, but imagining what might be, insisting that we live up to our highest ideals. Friends, church isn't being stuck in what's past or just settling for what is. It's aspiring to our highest ideals. It's asking, what can I do? What can we do to be God's church? What can we do to heal that gaping wound that is so agonizing and so obvious out in the world? What can we do to be the hands of Christ in this world? What can we do to be the kind of institution that people say God is there? God is there. What can we do to come to people who feel shame or they feel cockiness and say to them, you are God's child. You are God's child. Come be one of God's children with us. There will be so much joy, so much life. I love the church. I love this church. I love you. We love this church together. What a privilege. What a joy. We're always aspiring to those high ideals. Thanks be to God.